Here is something you have never questioned, because nobody questions it. Finn and Jake. That is the unit. It is in the theme song. It is the shape of every episode. A boy and his dog, going out, coming back. You have said their names in that order your entire life, and it has never once occurred to you that the order means anything. But think for a moment about what you actually assumed. You assumed Finn was the hero and Jake was the friend. You assumed Finn was the one the story was about, and Jake was the one who came along. You assumed, without ever putting it into words, that Finn was the protagonist and Jake was support. That is the standard reading. It is also, on close inspection, almost exactly backwards about the thing that matters. Because Jake is not helping Finn become a hero. Jake is not a mentor, and he is not a sidekick, and he is not the comic relief, although he is funny. Jake is doing something else entirely, all the way through, in plain sight, for 10 years. Jake is demonstrating an alternative. He is standing next to a boy who has decided that life is a problem to be solved, and he is quietly living as though it is not, and he is doing it well, and he is doing it constantly, and Finn is watching him do it every single day and does not see it. That is what tonight is about. Not what Jake taught Finn, what Jake knew and could not teach, and did not really try to teach, and what happened as a result. Let us be precise about the thing, because the vague version of this is a very common and very boring take. The vague version says that Jake is the wise one, that he is a secret sage in a dog's body, dispensing philosophy between snacks. That version has been circulating for years, and there is a whole industry of quotations built on it, and it is wrong, and it is wrong in a way that misses everything interesting. Jake is not wise. He gives bad advice regularly. He is confident about things he knows nothing about. He is frequently and obviously incorrect about the world, and does not much mind. If you sat down and made a list of Jake's stated opinions across 10 seasons, you would find a substantial percentage of them are nonsense. Wisdom is not what he has. Wisdom is a set of correct beliefs about how things work, and Jake does not have that. What Jake has is a posture, a way of standing in a life, and it is not made of beliefs at all, which is precisely why it will not transmit as advice, and precisely why 10 years of proximity did not install it in Finn. Here is the shape of it, as plainly as it can be put. Finn believes that a life has to be justified. That is the engine underneath everything he does. He is going to earn his place by being good, by being useful, by fixing what is broken. And the day he stops doing that is the day he becomes nothing. That belief is not stated in the show, and Finn would not recognize it if you described it to him, and it drives every choice he makes for 10 seasons. Jake does not believe that a life has to be justified, not because he has thought about it and concluded otherwise. He simply has never encountered the question. He is having a life. It is going all right. There is food in the treehouse, and there is a person he likes, and the weather is good. What would there be to justify? And those two positions live in the same house, share the same adventures, appear in the same frame for 280 episodes, and never once resolve into each other. That is the actual drama of Adventure Time, and it is much stranger than the one on the surface. The surface drama is a boy fighting monsters. The real one is a boy being shown, daily, over a decade, that there is another way to be, and being unable to receive it, because the thing being shown to him is not the kind of thing that can be shown. We are going to go through what Jake knew, piece by piece, and look at each one against what Finn did with it. We will start with the difference in what they are for, which is where everything else comes from. Then the sword, and what a sword does to the way you see a problem. Then the stretching, which is the show's best metaphor, and is about something quite different from what it appears to be about. We will look at the one piece of it that did transmit, the single sentence of Jake's that actually got into Finn and stayed, and why that particular one made it through when nothing else did. Then the harder half. Because this is not a story about a wise dog and a boy who failed to listen, and if it stops there, it is not worth 2 hours. Jake's posture has a price, and the show makes him pay it. In an episode about property that most people found boring, we will look at what his ease actually cost, and at whether Finn's restlessness is a failure at all, or simply a different way of being made. And at the end we will look at Finn at 29, in a life that is fine, still asking what it was for, with Jake not there. That is where this goes. It is late, and there is nothing urgent in any of it. Let it come slowly. Start with what each of them is for, because everything else follows from it. Finn is for something. That is the fundamental fact about him, and it is established in the first episode and never wavers. He is a hero, not in the sense of being brave, though he is, but in the sense that heroism is his function, the thing he does with his hours, the answer he would give if asked what he is. Watch how he behaves when there is nothing happening. He gets restless within about 4 minutes. He starts looking for something. He invents a quest if there is not one available. There are entire episodes whose plot is Finn being unable to tolerate an afternoon with no problem in it, going out to find one and finding one, and it going badly. That is not a personality quirk. That is a person who cannot be at rest, because rest raises a question he does not want asked. And you know where it comes from, because the show tells you plainly, and it tells you early, before you have any way of knowing what you are being told. Finn was left in the woods. Somebody had him, and did not keep him, and he was found by dogs, and the dogs loved him completely, and none of that answers the question that sits at the bottom of him, which is whether he was worth keeping. A child who has that question does not usually know they have it. What they have instead is a program running underneath everything, which says, be worth it, be useful, be so good that the question does not come up. That is Finn's entire operating system. He is going to be so unmistakably worth keeping that the original evidence is overturned, and because the question cannot actually be answered by any amount of heroism, he will never be finished, and every quest completed will be immediately followed by the need for another one. Jake was not left anywhere. Jake was born into a family that had him on purpose. There is a mother and a father and a brother. There is a house he grew up in. He was, from the beginning, a person whose presence in the world did not require explanation, and he has never had to think about it, in the same way you do not think about the floor. That difference is the whole thing. Everything else in this essay is downstream of it. Because Jake is not for anything. Ask what Jake is, and there is no functional answer available. He is not the hero. He is not the wizard, or the king, or the guardian of anything. He is a dog who lives in a tree with his friend and can stretch. And the show is completely comfortable with that. It never once suggests he ought to be more. There is no episode in which Jake is challenged to find his purpose and rises to it. He is allowed to simply be present, at full character weight, in the main slot of the title sequence, for 10 years, without a function. That is much rarer than it sounds. Almost every character, in almost every story, is for something. Having a character who is genuinely just there, and is not a joke about being useless, and is not on a secret arc toward becoming useful, is an unusual thing to build and hold for a decade. Finn cannot see it. That is the tragedy in miniature. He looks at Jake and sees his best friend, his brother, the person he loves most. He does not see a demonstration. Because a demonstration of not needing to justify yourself does not look like anything. It looks like a guy on a couch. Which brings us to the sword. Finn has a sword for essentially the entire series. Several of them, over time. Some are ordinary, and some are magical, and one of them is made out of his own arm, which is a thing worth pausing on, but not tonight. A sword is not just a weapon. A sword is a theory about problems. If you carry one, then problems are things with an outside and an inside, and the correct operation is to get through the outside. Problems have a location. They can be approached. There is a moment at which a problem is resolved, and after that moment, it is over. That is a theory, and it is a good theory, and it works on a surprising number of things when you are 12. Watch how Finn handles anything at all in the early seasons. Somebody is sad. He identifies the cause of the sadness, locates it in the world, and goes to it. Somebody is being oppressed. He finds the oppressor. There is a curse. He finds the thing to hit. His method is completely consistent, and it has an extraordinary success rate for about 3 seasons, which is exactly long enough to become permanent. And then he starts encountering things that are not shaped like that. He encounters a relationship that is going wrong, and there is nothing to approach. He encounters the fact of his father, and there is no external object to resolve. He encounters Simon, who has a problem that has no location and no outside and cannot be got through, and Finn is standing there, holding a sword, in a situation where the sword is not merely useless, but is actively the wrong shape of thought. The show is quite brutal about this, and does it slowly. Season after season, the proportion of problems that submit to Finn's method declines. He does not fail dramatically. He just finds himself, more and more often, in rooms where there is nothing to do, holding the only tool he has ever had. Jake does not have a sword. Jake has, instead, the ability to be any shape, and here is where the show's central metaphor does something almost nobody notices, because the stretching looks like a power, and it is actually a philosophy. Consider what Jake actually does with the ability to become anything. He becomes a bridge, when a bridge is needed. He becomes a container. He becomes a shield around Finn. He becomes a set of stairs, a boat, a large hand, a room. And then, when the thing is over, he goes back to being a dog on a couch. That is the pattern, and it is completely consistent for 10 years. He takes the shape the moment requires, exactly, and then he stops taking it. He does not have a preferred form he is trying to achieve. He does not have a project of becoming. He is not working toward being the best possible version of a shapeshifter. He has no ambition regarding his own power whatsoever, which, if you think about it, is close to unique among characters with a superhuman ability. He also, and this is the part that gets missed, does not become more than is needed. He does not become enormous when medium will do. He does not turn the ability into an identity. Now put the two next to each other. Finn approaches a situation with a fixed instrument and asks what can be done to the situation with the instrument he has. Jake approaches a situation by becoming what the situation requires and then reverting. Those are two different theories of how a person meets the world, drawn as visual metaphors, running side by side in the same frame every week for a decade, and the show never once points at either of them. And here is the thing that makes it more than a neat observation. Jake's method requires you to have no fixed shape you are attached to. It requires that you not need to be anything in particular, and Finn needs, very badly, to be something in particular, because if he is not the hero, then he is a boy who was left in the woods. So Finn could not use Jake's method even if it were explained to him. It is not a technique. It is a consequence of not having a question at the bottom of you. There is one more difference in this area, and it is small, and it is the one that hurts. Jake is stronger than Finn. Not marginally, substantially, obviously, by any measure. A person who can become any shape at any size is more powerful than a boy with a sword by a very large margin. And the show establishes this repeatedly and casually, and then does nothing with it. And Jake never once seems to notice. He does not lead. He does not take over. In situations that are clearly beyond Finn's ability, Jake helps and then hands it back. He treats Finn as the one doing this, permanently, for for 10 years, in the face of continuous evidence that he could do it better himself. At 9, you do not register this at all, because Finn is the hero, and heroes are the strongest. Later you understand that you have been watching an adult let a child be in charge of something, at some cost, on purpose, for the child's benefit, without ever mentioning it. Anyone who has done that with a younger person knows exactly how much restraint it takes and how invisible it is by design. You have to keep your hands off it. You have to let them do it worse than you would. You have to be genuinely available and genuinely not in charge, at the same time, continuously. Jake does that for a decade, and nobody in the show ever thanks him, because nobody in the show ever notices, because it is working. Now, the one thing that got through. There is a sentence of Jake's that everybody knows. It is possibly the most quoted line in the entire series. He says, in passing, that being bad at something is the first step toward being sort of good at something. It is delivered as a throwaway. There is no music. He is not making a speech. It is the kind of thing he says 40 times an episode, and most of the other 39 are nonsense, and this one is not. And it landed. Not just with the audience, although it did that too. It landed with Finn. You can watch him operate on it for years afterward. He tries things he is bad at. He does not treat early incompetence as a verdict. He has an unusual tolerance for being visibly terrible at something in front of other people, which is a genuinely rare quality and is not native to him, and came from that sentence. So it is worth asking why that one made it through when nothing else did. Here is what I think, and you can weigh it. That sentence is compatible with Finn's operating system. It does not challenge the belief that a life must be justified. It just improves the method. It says, you can still become worthy, and here is a better route, one that does not require you to be immediately excellent. It is an optimization, not a contradiction. Everything else Jake knew is a contradiction. Everything else says the project is unnecessary, and a person cannot receive information that says their central project is unnecessary, because the central project is the thing doing the receiving. That is why demonstration failed. Not because Finn was inattentive. He was extremely attentive. He loved Jake enormously and watched him constantly. He simply could not perceive the demonstration as one, because to perceive it, he would have had to already be standing somewhere he could not get to. Which brings us to what Jake actually does when somebody is in pain, and this is where you start to recognize things. Watch Jake in a room with somebody who is having a bad time. He does it many times across the series, and the procedure is always the same. He does not ask what is wrong. He does not offer an analysis. He does not identify the underlying issue and address it, which is what you would do if you had a sword. He makes food. Or he tells a story with no relevance to anything. Or he suggests a plan that is completely inadequate to the situation. Or he says something that is not even true, cheerfully, and then moves on. And it works. Over and over. In 10 years of television, it works, and the show does not explain why. Here is why. It works because the content was never the point. What the person in the room needed was not a solution and not an insight. What they needed was for somebody else to be present and to be deliberate about the fact that they are having a hard time. The sandwich is not a sandwich. The sandwich is evidence that somebody is paying attention. Finn's method is different, and it is worth watching closely, because it is the method most people use, and it is the one that fails. Finn, confronted with somebody in pain, tries to fix the pain. He wants to identify the cause and remove it. And when the cause cannot be removed, which is most of the time, he becomes agitated, and then frustrated, and then occasionally angry, because a person whose theory of problems is a sword will experience an unfixable problem as a personal failure. That is the thing. That is why he cannot sit with anyone. Sitting with somebody requires you to be all right with the situation not improving while you sit there, and Finn has an entire identity riding on situations improving. You know both of these people. There is a decent chance you have been both of these people at different ages, and there is a specific moment in most people's 20s or 30s when they switch from one to the other, and it is usually caused by encountering a problem in somebody they love that cannot be solved by anything at all. That is the moment you become Jake, not by learning something, by running out of options and discovering that just being there did something anyway. There is a related thing, and it is about which problems you accept. Finn accepts all of them. This is presented as heroism, and it largely is. And it is also, structurally, a person with no filter. If something is wrong within his perception, it is his. He does not triage. He does not decline. There is no episode in which Finn hears about a problem and decides it is not his to solve. Jake declines constantly. He is asked to care about things, and he says no. Or he says yes, and then does not. Or he simply is not interested. He has strong preferences about how he spends an afternoon, and he defends them. When Finn wants to go and do something, and Jake does not want to, Jake says so, and sometimes Finn goes alone. At 9, this reads as Jake being lazy. It is the most common criticism of him in the fandom, and it has been for 15 years. Later, you recognize it as a person with a functioning boundary, which is a thing most people spend their 30s trying to construct, after their 20s nearly destroyed them. Because Finn's method is not sustainable, and the show knows it. Somebody who accepts every problem within perception will eventually meet more problems than there are hours, and then they will have to choose anyway, but they will do the choosing badly and late and full of guilt rather than early and cleanly and with a clear conscience. Jake chooses early and cleanly. He has no guilt about it whatsoever. He is not ashamed of wanting to stay in. And the thing that makes the show good, rather than merely clever, is that Jake is not a worse friend for this. He is the better friend of the two, measurably, across 10 seasons. He is the one who is reliably available for the things that matter. It turns out that the person who declines most things is the one with something left when something real arrives. That is a genuinely useful thing to know, and almost nobody transmits it to anybody. Adventure Time put it in a cartoon by way of a dog who did not want to get up. There is a thing about how each of them makes a decision, and it is worth going slowly on because it is where most of the daily difference lives. Finn deliberates. Not always visibly, but the process is there. He weighs. He considers whether a course of action is right, whether it is what a hero would do, whether he will be able to live with it. There are episodes constructed entirely around Finn being unable to choose because both options fail some internal test. That internal test is the file again. Every decision is being assessed not only on its outcome, but on what it will say about him afterward. Jake decides instantly and revises without friction. Watch it. He picks a course of action in about a second, commits fully, and if it turns out to be wrong, he abandons it in another second and picks a different one, with no apparent transition and no evident cost. That looks like impulsiveness, and it is partly impulsiveness. It is also the natural behavior of a person for whom decisions do not encode identity. If a choice is just a choice, you can make it fast and drop it fast. If a choice is evidence about your character, you have to get it right, and getting it right is slow, and abandoning it is expensive, because abandonment is also evidence. The practical result is that Jake covers more ground. He tries more things. He is wrong more often and arrives at workable answers sooner, because he is running many cheap iterations, while Finn is running few expensive ones. Anyone who has watched a nervous person and a relaxed person approach the same problem has seen this. It is not that the relaxed person is smarter, they are just paying much less per attempt. And here is the sharp edge on it, which the show does not shy away from. Finn's expensive deliberation produces better decisions in the situations that matter most. When something genuinely important is on the line, when the stakes are real and irreversible, Finn's process is the correct one, and Jake's is not. The show gives you several of these, and Jake is not the one you want in them. He will pick fast, and it will be wrong, and he will move on, and somebody will have been hurt. So it is not that one style wins, it is that they are optimized for different frequencies, and the tragedy is that neither of them can switch. Finn cannot be cheap about small things. Jake cannot be expensive about large ones. And they are in the same house, and between them they have full coverage, and separately each is badly exposed. That is what a good pairing actually is, and it is why the show works, and it is why almost every enduring friendship in real life is between people who do not resemble each other. There is a related observation about apologies, and it is short. Jake apologizes easily, and it costs nothing, and it also does not change anything. He is sorry, sincerely, in the moment, and then he is not thinking about it anymore, and the behavior recurs. Finn apologizes with great difficulty, and it costs him enormously, and it usually works, in the sense that the behavior stops. The easy apology is pleasant to receive and does not repair anything. The hard one is uncomfortable for everyone, and is the one that actually alters the future. That is not a comfortable finding, and the show does not soften it. It simply puts the two of them next to each other for 10 years and lets you count the recurrences. Now the curriculum. This is the part that took me longest to see, and it changed how I watch the show. There is a category of Adventure Time episode where nothing happens. There is no threat and no villain and no plot in the ordinary sense. Finn and Jake want to do something small. There is a minor difficulty. 11 minutes go by. There are dozens of these. They are scattered evenly through all 10 seasons. When they aired, they were the ones people skipped. And almost all of them are Jake's. That is the pattern. Look at who initiates in those episodes. It is nearly always Jake who wants the small thing. Jake who has a plan about a sandwich, or a nap, or a particular arrangement of the afternoon. Finn is dragged into these. He participates with a slightly puzzled goodwill, and then something in him starts looking for a quest, around minute 6. Those episodes are not filler. Those episodes are the curriculum. That is Jake teaching, in the only way this material can be taught, which is by arranging for it to happen and hoping the other person notices they are inside it. He is not saying the ordinary afternoon is the point. He is producing ordinary afternoons, dozens of them, over 10 years, at considerable effort, and putting Finn in the middle of them. And Finn does not learn it. He enjoys them. He is not miserable, but he never comes to want them for himself. And you can see this because he never initiates one. Not once in 10 seasons does Finn propose that they do nothing. The show is showing you a decade of failed instruction, and it is showing it to you in the format of the episodes you thought were the boring ones. If you go back now and watch those specifically, in order, as a sequence, they are almost unbearable. Because you can see what Jake is doing. He is not relaxing. He is trying, in the only way available to him, to get his friend to have a life rather than a mission. And the reason it is unbearable is that you know how much time they have, and he does not. There is one more thing Jake knew, and it is the largest, and the show handles it so lightly that it takes years to notice it was handled at all. Jake is not afraid of ending. He is not brave about it. Bravery implies a fear that is being overcome. Jake simply does not appear to have the anxiety. He goes into dangerous situations without the particular hum that Finn has around them. He talks about death casually. When the show puts him in situations where he is confronted with his own nature, his own origin, the strangeness of what he is, he finds it interesting rather than threatening, and then he has a snack. There is an episode where he goes inside his own body and meets the things living in it, and comes out the other side essentially unchanged, having had an experience that would rearrange most people permanently. It does not stick to him. Nothing sticks to him. And there is a stretch late in the series where he encounters something enormous, something cosmic, something offering a kind of transcendence, and the interesting thing is not that he refuses it, it is that he does not seem to feel the pull of it. Whatever appetite would make transcendence attractive is simply not present in him. You have to have wanted more to want out. Finn, by contrast, has an unmistakable relationship with mortality, and it shows up as urgency. He is always slightly running. He needs to get to the thing. He has, underneath the heroism, an awareness that the hours are counted, and that he has not yet done enough with them. And that awareness is not wisdom. It is the same engine again. The one that says, be worth it. Faster. And Jake, who has done nothing with his hours by any accounting Finn would recognize, is perfectly at peace. Now we have to turn this over, because a 2-hour argument that only runs in one direction is propaganda, and Jake's posture has a price, and the show makes him pay it in full. The episode is about real estate. That is the whole surface of it. Jake's son buys the treehouse and tries to force his father into being responsible, and there is a business plot, and when it aired, most people found it slow. Here is what is actually in it. Jake has 5 children. They were born and they grew to adulthood in a matter of days, because of what they are, and by the time Jake had properly understood that he was a father, they were adults with opinions about him. That is a genuine misfortune and not his fault. What is his fault is what he did with the years afterward, which was not very much. He is not cruel to his children. He is not absent in the dramatic sense. He is fond of them, in a general way, at a distance, and he has not thought about them very hard, and he has not made himself available in any structured way, and when one of them arrives with a grievance, Jake does not have a good answer, because he has not been paying attention, and the grievance is correct. That is the part the show does not soften. Kim Kil-hwan is not wrong. He is annoying, and he is officious, and he is wrong about many things, and about this one central thing he is completely right. So here is the cost, stated plainly. The thing that makes Jake an extraordinary friend is the same thing that makes him a mediocre father. Being at ease, not needing outcomes, declining problems, living in the afternoon. Every one of those, applied to a friendship with a boy who needs somebody unbothered next to him, is a gift of enormous value. Every one of them, applied to 5 children who needed somebody to structure their early life, is a failure. The posture is not universally correct. It is correct for some relationships, and it is wrong for others. And Jake does not have the capacity to tell which is which, because telling which is which would require exactly the kind of anxious attention he does not have. You cannot have the ease without the cost. That is what the show is saying, and it says it without a single line of commentary. There is no scene where anyone articulates it. There is just a man being confronted by his son in an episode about property and having nothing to say. And this reframes Finn entirely, which is the point of taking the turn. Because Finn's restlessness, the thing we have spent an hour describing as a wound, is not only a wound, it is also the reason he shows up. It is the reason there is not a single person in the land of Wu who needed him and did not get him. The anxious attention that will not let him sit still is the same attention that notices when somebody is in trouble. Jake would not have noticed. Jake, left to himself, would have had a lovely decade and helped almost nobody, because helping requires you to be bothered, and being bothered is precisely what he does not do. So the correct reading is not that Jake is right and Finn is wrong. The correct reading is that they are 2 settings of the same dial, each of which buys something at the price of something else, and that the show put them in the same house so you could see both bills. Finn pays for his heroism with the inability to rest. Jake pays for his rest with the things he did not do, because resting was more available. Neither of them can pay the other bill instead. that is not a moral failing in either direction. It is what a person is. There is something in the pairing that only becomes visible if you count the years. So let us count them. Finn is roughly 12 when the show begins, and roughly 17 when it ends. That is 5 years of story across 10 seasons. Jake is an adult for all of it. He does not develop the way Finn develops. He is essentially the same person in the last episode as in the first, and this is normally a criticism of a character, and here, it is the design. Because that is what it is like to be the older one in a friendship with a large age gap. You are the constant. The other person is going through the most transformative 5 years of their life, and you are having a normal 5 years. And from your side, the friendship feels stable, and from their side, it is one of the primary forces shaping them. Jake does not know he is doing that. He thinks he has a friend. He does not think of himself as an environmental condition of somebody else's adolescence. And Finn does not know it either, because you never know it at the time. You find out at about 30 when you catch yourself doing something and realize where you got it. Which means the central relationship of the entire show is asymmetrical, in a way neither party can perceive, and the asymmetry is invisible from both ends, and the show never mentions it once. There is a specific consequence of this, and it is worth stating because it applies directly to your own life. Somebody is currently a constant for you. Somebody's ordinary steady presence is doing something to your shape that neither of you can see, and you are, simultaneously, a constant for somebody else, and doing the same thing to them, without knowing what it is you are transmitting. You cannot audit that. There is no way to find out. The only thing you can do about it is the thing Jake does, which is to be reasonably all right, on a regular basis, around people who are younger than you, and to accept that you will never learn what it did. There is one more thing about the difference that shows up in language, and it is small, and it is everywhere once you hear it. Listen to how each of them talks about the future. Finn uses the word going to constantly. He is going to do a thing. He is going to become a thing. He is going to make something right. His sentences reach forward. Jake's sentences sit in the present tense almost exclusively. He is doing a thing. There is a thing here. This is good. When he does refer to the future, it is usually about lunch. That is not a writing quirk, or if it started as one, it became load-bearing, because the tense a person lives in is the tense they speak in, and it is very hard to fake in either direction. And there is a second linguistic thing, which is about the word should. Finn says should a great deal. We should go. I should have. You should. It is the vocabulary of a person with a standard running against which things are being measured. Jake almost never says it. He says want and like and let us. He operates in preferences rather than obligations, and a life run on preferences has an entirely different texture from a life run on obligations, even when the two lives contain the same activities. You can do exactly the same day as a series of shoulds or as a series of wants, and it will be a different day. That is the smallest version of the entire argument, and it is possibly the only actionable thing in this whole essay, so it is worth saying clearly. The activities do not have to change. The tense might. Let us give Finn his due now, properly, because the case so far has been made against him, and it is not the whole case. Finn learns an enormous amount across 10 seasons. He is one of the most changed characters in animation, and the change is real and hard-won, and mostly not the change we have been discussing. He learns limits. The boy in Season 1 believes there is a correct answer to every situation and that he can find it. The young man in Season 10 does not believe that. He has met enough situations without answers that he has stopped expecting one, and he has stopped experiencing their absence as his personal failure. That took years, and it cost him. He learns that being good is not the same as being right. This is a distinction that most adults never make. Finn spends several seasons discovering that his intentions do not sanctify his behavior, that he can want the best for somebody and still be doing damage, that the sincerity of his heroism is not a defense against its consequences. He is confronted with this repeatedly, and he does not enjoy it, and he takes it in. He learns to apologize without immediately doing something to fix it. That is a subtle one, and if you watch for it, you can see it arrive around the 7th season. Early Finn responds to having done wrong by launching into a corrective quest, because a quest is a thing he knows how to do. Later Finn can stand still and say he is sorry, and then not do anything. And the not doing anything is the hard part, and it is a genuine achievement. And above all, he learns to stay. That is the big one, and the show builds toward it for a decade. Finn is the son of a man who does not stay. That is the inheritance, and the show is quite direct that it is an inheritance, that this is a pattern that runs in a family, that a person raised in the wake of somebody's departure has a tendency to depart, and Finn does not. Over and over, in situations where leaving is available and reasonable and would cost him nothing, he stays. He stays with people who are difficult. He stays with people who cannot get better. Late in the series, he is the one who is there for Simon, who by that point needs somebody to be steady in the room and has no obvious claim on Finn at all. That is the thing he built out of nothing. Nobody modeled it for him. Jake did not teach him that. Because Jake is not a stayer in that sense. Jake is a companion, which is not the same thing. Finn constructed staying out of the negative space where his father should have been, by deciding, repeatedly, over years, to be the thing that was missing. So when we say Finn never learned what Jake knew, we should be clear about the size of what he did learn instead. He rebuilt his own inheritance. That is a bigger job than acquiring a relaxed attitude, and most people never manage it, and he did it in his teens. The thing he did not learn is smaller and stranger, and cannot be constructed by effort, which is why effort could not get him there. Because here is the difficulty with what Jake knew. It cannot be taught by instruction. If Jake had said to Finn, directly, in words, that a life does not have to be justified, Finn would have agreed pleasantly and continued exactly as before. People do not update their central operating belief on hearing a sentence. The belief is what is doing the hearing. It cannot be taught by demonstration either, and this is the part that is genuinely sad. Because demonstration is supposed to be the good method. Show, do not tell, model the behavior. But a demonstration of not needing to justify your life is invisible. It has no positive content. It looks like a man on a couch. There is nothing to point at. Jake could not draw Finn's attention to it because there was nothing there to draw attention to. The whole substance of it is an absence, and absences do not demonstrate. And it cannot be taught by argument, because the moment you argue for it, you have made it into a project, and a project is exactly the thing it is not. So what is left? How does anybody ever get there? The honest answer is that people mostly get there by exhaustion. You run the justification program for 20 or 30 years, and it does not terminate. You achieve the thing, and the question does not go away. You achieve a bigger thing, and the question does not go away. And at some point, usually in a fairly undramatic week, the program simply stops. Not because you defeated it, but because you got tired. And in the quiet afterward, you notice that nothing bad happened, and that you are still here, and that the afternoon is quite nice. That is not enlightenment. It is closer to a machine running out of fuel, and it usually happens late, and it usually happens alone, and it almost never happens because somebody told you. Jake did not get there. That is the other thing to be clear about. He did not arrive at his position, he started at it. He is not a person who worked something out. He is a person who was never given the problem. Which means, and this is uncomfortable, that Jake is not actually a model for anyone. You cannot follow him. There is no path from where Finn is standing to where Jake is standing, because Jake is not standing at the end of a path, he was set down there. The most Jake can do And the most he does is be visible. Be a standing piece of evidence that a person can live that way, so that when Finn eventually gets there under his own power, decades later, he will recognize the place. That is a real service, and it is the only one available. It is what everyone who is easy in themselves does for everyone who is not. They do not transmit it. They just prove it exists. Before we go into the family, there is one more piece of the method to look at, and it is the strangest one, and it took me a long time to be sure it was really there. Jake does not appear to have plans. Not in the sense of being disorganized, although he is. In the sense that he does not seem to hold a picture of a future that he is moving toward. There is no version of Jake in 5 years that Jake is working on. Finn has one constantly. Finn is always becoming. He has an idea of the hero he will be, and he measures himself against it and adjusts. That is what a person does, and everyone you know does it, and it is the standard way a human being organizes time. Jake does not do it, and the effect is that he is much more available to the present than anyone around him. Think about what a plan actually costs you, moment to moment. If you are holding a picture of who you are supposed to become, then every hour gets assessed against it. Did this hour move me toward it? Was this a good use? And an afternoon spent doing nothing scores badly, and you feel it scoring badly, and the feeling is present in the room with you the whole time you are supposedly relaxing. That is why so many people cannot enjoy a day off. The day off is being marked. Jake does not mark anything. There is no rubric. An afternoon is not for anything, so it cannot fail to be for it. And there is a strange consequence of this that the show demonstrates repeatedly, which is that Jake notices more than Finn does. That seems backwards. Finn is the attentive one, the vigilant one, the one scanning for problems. But scanning for problems is not the same as noticing, and it is arguably the opposite, because a person scanning is filtering everything through a question, and only the things that answer the question get through. Jake, with no question running, gets the whole signal. He notices what people are like. He notices when the weather is good. He notices when something is funny. In episode after episode, Jake is the first to spot the thing that is actually going on emotionally in a room, and he does not do anything useful with it, and he saw it first. That is a real advantage, and it is not available to anyone with a plan. Now here is where we have to be careful, because everything just said can slide into a version of this argument that is comfortable and false. The comfortable version says, stop planning, be present, and you will be happier. That is a whole genre, and most of it is nonsense, and Adventure Time is not saying it. Because Jake's presentness is not a practice he adopted. He did not attain it. He is a character who was written without the anxiety, in the same way a character might be written without a left hand. And telling an anxious person to simply not have the anxiety is not advice. It is a description of somebody else. The show knows this. That is why it never has Jake explain himself. If Jake had a speech about living in the moment, the show would be an infomercial. Instead, it has a dog who wants lunch, and it lets you draw your own conclusions. And the conclusion available is not become like this. It is people like this exist, and one of them is fond of you. That is smaller, and it is true. And small true things are worth more at 1 in the morning than large false ones. There is one relationship of Jake's that Finn is not inside, and it is the most revealing thing in the whole series about what Jake actually is. And it involves a pink shadow in a bathtub at the center of the universe. Prismo lives at the middle of everything. He is a wish-granting entity, two-dimensional, cast by an old man dreaming in another realm entirely. He has access to the structure of reality. He can, within limits, do essentially anything. And Jake goes to hang out with him. That is the relationship. Jake, who has no particular business at the center of the universe, goes there, and the two of them do nothing. They have snacks. They talk about not very much. Prismo makes a joke. Jake laughs. There is no quest attached. no reason for the visit, no outcome sought. An entity with the power to reorganize existence, and a dog, sitting together in a room outside of time, having a perfectly ordinary afternoon. Now consider what this tells you. Finn is not there. This is Jake's own thing, conducted separately, and Finn does not seem to be especially aware of it. Jake has a life that does not include Finn, and it consists of exactly the same activity as the life that does include Finn, performed with somebody else. That is the confirmation that his posture is not a service he provides. He is not being easy for Finn's benefit. He is like this on his own time, with cosmic entities, at the center of reality, where nobody is watching and there is nobody to model anything for. And there is a second thing, which is what Prismo gets out of it. Prismo is enormously powerful and enormously alone. Everybody who comes to see him wants something. That is the whole design of his existence. People arrive, they want a wish. He grants or refuses, they leave. He is a function that other people call. And then a dog turns up who does not want anything. That is why Prismo likes him. Not because Jake is interesting. He is not especially. Because Jake is the only visitor in the history of the universe who came by to see how he was doing. If you have ever been the competent one in a group, the one people come to when they need something, you know precisely what that is worth. The friend who calls you when they do not need anything is a completely different category of person, and there are usually about two of them. Jake is that, structurally, for everybody, because he does not want things. He is the only person in most rooms who is not there transactionally, and people can feel it without being able to name it. That is not a technique either. It is the same absence again, producing a different effect in a different room. And it is the answer to an objection that should have occurred to you by now, which is, if Jake has no ambition and no plans and does not want anything, why does anybody like him? What is he bringing? He is bringing the absence of demand. In a world where everybody wants something from you, the person who wants nothing is the most restful thing in it. And being restful is not nothing, it is close to the rarest commodity available. We should stay with Prismo for one more moment, because there is a thing at the end of that friendship that matters. Prismo dies, or ceases, or unravels. The mechanics are strange, but the effect is that he is gone, and it is Jake's doing indirectly. And Jake grieves, properly, visibly, in a way that is not funny and does not get a joke. That is important, because we have spent a long time establishing that nothing sticks to Jake, that he does not keep a file, that he is immune to accumulation, and it would be easy to conclude from that he does not feel things deeply. He does. He is not detached. The absence of the justification question does not produce a person who is unmoved. It produces a person who is unburdened, and those are different. Jake loses somebody, and it hurts him exactly as much as it would hurt anyone. He simply does not add anything to it. There is no second layer of self-assessment about whether he handled it correctly, no accounting of what he should have done, no file entry, just the loss, at full size, and then eventually not. That is what grief looks like without the machinery attached, and it is worth seeing once, because most people have never seen it and assume the machinery is part of the grief. It is not. It is optional equipment, and most of us were issued it early. There is another domestic detail that says a great deal, and it is easy to miss, because it is a running gag. Jake plays the viola, badly. He has played it for years. He does not improve, in any noticeable way, across 10 seasons. He is not taking lessons. He is not working toward anything. He picks it up, he makes some sound, he puts it down, and he enjoys it completely. Now think about what a person running Finn's program does with a hobby. They get better at it. That is what a hobby is for. It goes into the file as evidence. There is progress, and the progress is the pleasure, or at least it is inseparable from the pleasure. and an activity that produces no improvement starts to feel like waste. An enormous number of adults cannot do anything they are not getting better at. They will tell you they do not have hobbies, and what they mean is that they have no activities that survive the absence of measurable progress. Jake has been mediocre at the viola for a decade, and it has never once occurred to him to mind. And there is a worm living in it. That is the other part, and it is one of the strangest small facts in the show. There is a worm called Shelby who lives inside Jake's viola. He has been in there for years. Jake knows. Jake is not bothered. He is hosting an entire other conscious creature in his instrument, and it does not require comment. That is a very silly detail, and it is also the most concise possible statement of the character. Something has moved into your stuff. It is a whole person. It has opinions. Fine, it is a nice day. There is a piece of this that lives in Jake's own family, and it makes the picture sharper, so we should go there. Jake has a brother, not one of his children, a brother, from the household he grew up in. His name is Jermaine, and he appears rarely, and every appearance is uncomfortable. Jermaine stayed. That is his entire situation. When Jake went off to have a life with Finn, Jermaine remained at the family home, holding the responsibilities their father left behind, doing the maintenance, keeping the thing standing. He has been doing it for years. He is not happy. And when he and Jake are finally in a room together, what comes out of Jermaine is resentment, and the resentment is aimed at Jake, and it is not really about Jake at all. It is about a father who assigned an enormous unstated burden to one son and not the other, and then died before anyone could raise it with him. Look at what this does to our picture of Jake. Jake's ease is not only a temperament, it is also, partly, a position. Somebody else took the weight. There was a load in that family, and it did not get distributed evenly, and the one who did not receive it grew up light, and the one who did receive it grew up heavy, and neither of them chose. That is not an accusation. Jake did not engineer it, and does not appear to know it happened. But it complicates the idea that his posture is available to anyone, because part of what produced it was somebody else carrying something on his behalf. You can see the same structure in ordinary families constantly. There is a sibling who is easy, and a sibling who is not, and everybody attributes it to personality, and quite often, what actually happened is that one of them got handed something early, and the other did not, and 40 years later, one is relaxed, and one is tight, and neither has ever traced it back. Jermaine is in about 2 episodes. The show does not linger on him, but he is the footnote that keeps the Jake argument honest, and it is worth having. And there is Lady Rainicorn, who is the other place Jake is different from how he looks. Jake is in a long-term relationship for essentially the whole run of the show, and it is one of the least dramatized romantic relationships in animation, and that is the point of it. There is no will they won't they. There is no crisis. There is no episode where it nearly ends and is saved. They are together, they like each other, they spend time, they have a family, and the show treats this as unremarkable and does not mine it for plot. Compare this to Finn, whose romantic life is a series of intense events with clear beginnings and painful ends, each of which is a whole arc, each of which changes him. 2 models again. Finn's relationships are things that happen to him. Jake's relationship is a thing he is in. And what is striking is how little the show gives you about the interior of Jake's. You do not get much access. Lady Rainicorn speaks a language most viewers cannot understand, without subtitles, for the entire series. You are structurally locked out of the content of their conversations. That is a strange choice, and I think it is deliberate, and I think it is saying something about how a long partnership looks from outside, which is opaque, and slightly boring, and completely solid. You cannot see into other people's long relationships. You only see 2 figures who seem to be getting on, and have been for years, and whose actual substance is conducted in a language you do not speak. Finn watches this at close range for a decade, and does not appear to learn anything from it either, which is consistent, because the same problem applies. There is nothing to see. It looks like nothing. It looks like two people who are fine. Let us also look at what Jake does not want to know about himself, because it is one of the sharpest contrasts in the show. Finn is obsessed with his own origin, where he came from, who his parents were, whether there are other humans, what he is. Entire arcs are built on this. He crosses dimensions for it. He loses an arm over it. The question of his own beginning drives him for years, and the answers, when he gets them, are almost uniformly worse than not knowing. Jake is a magic dog. He can stretch to any shape and size for reasons that are never explained to him and that he never asks about. He was born strange. His origin involves something that happened to his father, an encounter with something not from here, and it is genuinely bizarre, and the information is available. And Jake is not curious. He finds out some of it, eventually, and his reaction is mild interest, followed by getting on with the afternoon. The knowledge does not restructure him. He does not go looking for more. It turns out he can live perfectly well without an account of what he is. Now, one reading of that is that Jake is incurious in the ordinary sense, and there is something to it. He is not an intellectually driven person. The better reading is that Finn needs an origin story because he needs a justification, and an origin is the first place people look for one. If I know where I came from, I will know what I am for. That is the hope underneath the search, and it is why the search will not end when the facts are found, because facts do not do that. Jake does not need to know what he is for, so he does not need to know where he came from. The two questions are the same question, and he does not have it. That is quite a lot of philosophy to encode in the difference between a boy who searches for his father and a dog who does not care that he is magic. The show never says a word about it. There is one more small comparison that belongs here, and it is about how each of them handles being given something. Finn is uncomfortable receiving. Watch him when somebody thanks him properly, or gives him a reward, or does something generous for him unprompted. He deflects. He minimizes. He redirects to what still needs doing. That is not modesty. A person whose existence is provisional cannot comfortably accept a gift, because a gift is unearned by definition, and unearned things do not settle the account, they complicate it. Receiving puts you in debt, and he already believes he is in debt. Jake receives beautifully. He is delighted. He accepts things with no hesitation and no discount, and he does not immediately reciprocate. That last part is the one people miss. Jake does not immediately reciprocate, and this is not rudeness, it is the absence of a ledger. He is not balancing anything. Somebody gave him a thing, and it was nice, and now he has the thing. Being able to receive is a genuine skill, and almost nobody names it. If you know somebody who cannot be given anything without discomfort, you know how tiring it is to be generous to them, and you probably know that after a while you stop trying. That is a hidden cost of Finn's condition. People eventually stop offering, not out of resentment, but because the offering keeps producing a small awkwardness, and the awkwardness is enough. The person who cannot receive slowly becomes the person nobody gives anything to, and then the evidence file gets another entry, and the entry appears to confirm the original belief. That is how these things maintain themselves, not through dramatic events, through 100 small deflections that gradually rearrange the world into the shape the belief predicted. And Jake, receiving cheerfully for 10 years, is quietly demonstrating the exit, and nobody sees it because it looks like a dog being pleased about a present. We should talk about the jokes, because Jake's humor is a technology, and it is doing something specific. Jake is funny more or less constantly. That is his register. Even in serious situations, There is usually something slightly absurd coming from his direction, and the standard reading is that he is the comic relief, and comic relief is a structural function that means this character exists to lower tension so the audience can rest. That reading is not wrong about the effect, it is wrong about who it is for. Jake's jokes are not aimed at the audience. Watch where they land. They land on Finn, in the moment, when Finn is winding up. There is a very consistent pattern where Finn is escalating internally, getting tighter, moving toward the state where he is going to do something with a sword, and Jake says something ridiculous, and the escalation breaks. That is not comic relief. That is an intervention, delivered as a joke, because a joke is the only delivery mechanism that will get past the defenses of a person in that state. If you say to somebody who is spiraling, "You are spiraling," they will spiral harder. If you say something stupid about a sandwich, the machinery has to stop for half a second to process it, and half a second is often enough. Anybody who has managed an anxious person knows this technique, and knows it cannot be explained to the person you are using it on, because explaining it destroys it. So Jake spends 10 years operating on his best friend with a tool his best friend cannot know about, and Finn, for his part, thinks Jake is just being Jake. There is a second function too, and it is the one that costs Jake something. The jokes also keep the conversation from going somewhere. When Jake does not want to discuss a thing, the thing gets a joke, and the joke closes the door, and it closes it so pleasantly that nobody notices a door was closed. Watch him around his children. Watch him when the subject of his father comes up. Watch him in the 2 or 3 moments across 10 seasons where somebody asks him something real about himself. There is always a joke, and it is always good, and the subject always changes. The same instrument that regulates Finn also protects Jake, and it protects him from being known, and the price of that is a slight and permanent unreachability that his family notice and Finn does not. That is what makes him a character rather than a philosophy. He is not enlightened, he is defended. Let us look at the stretch where Finn's method breaks down, because the show puts it on screen very deliberately, and it is not comfortable viewing. There is a period, somewhere around the middle of the series, where Finn is not likable. This is not accidental. He becomes angry and self-involved and manipulative in small ways, and he does things that are genuinely poor, and the show does not rescue him from it or explain it away. What is happening is that his method has stopped working, and he does not have another one. He has just learned things about his father that cannot be fixed. He has lost a relationship in a way that was substantially his fault. He is carrying an injury that has no external cause to defeat, and a person whose entire theory is that problems have an outside and can be got through, when handed a problem with no outside, will start applying the method to whatever is nearest, and what is nearest is usually other people. You have seen this happen to somebody. Possibly, you have been the one it happened to. The person who is competent and driven and generous, meeting the first thing in their life that competence does not touch, and going through a period where they are extremely difficult to be around, not because they have become worse, but because their one tool is being applied to something it cannot cut. And what does Jake do during this? Very little. He does not confront Finn. He does not stage an intervention. He is around, being fine, at a low volume, for as long as it takes. That is either the best possible response or a failure to act, and the show leaves it genuinely ambiguous, which I think is correct. A better friend might have said something. A different friend would have made it worse. Jake does the only thing available to a person with his equipment, which is to remain present at a constant temperature until the weather changes. It does change. Finn comes out the other side. Whether that is because of Jake or merely alongside Jake is not knowable by us or by them, which is also true of most of the times somebody has helped you. There is one more contrast worth drawing before we go forward in time. and it is about how each of them handles being wrong. Finn takes it hard, every single time. Being wrong is not information to Finn, it is evidence, and the evidence goes into the file that he has been carrying since the woods. He apologizes intensely and disproportionately, and then tries to earn it back. Jake is wrong constantly, and it costs him nothing at all. He will state something confidently, be corrected, accept the correction, and continue at exactly the same volume, with no residue. He does not appear to store it. There is no accumulating record of Jake's errors inside Jake. And that is not arrogance, which is the obvious misreading. Arrogance would be refusing the correction. He takes the correction cheerfully. He simply does not experience having been wrong as a fact about his worth. That is the same thing again, arriving from another direction. If your life does not require justification, then being wrong is just being wrong. It is a small local event about a subject. It does not go in the file, because there is no file. Finn has a file. Everything goes in it. He has been keeping it since before he could talk. And 10 years next to a person with no file did not close it. Because you cannot close a file by watching somebody not have one. We have been fairly generous to Jake for an hour, and it is time to say the hard thing properly, because it is not just the fatherhood. Jake is sometimes a bad influence, and the show knows it, and it lets the damage stand. He encourages Finn to take shortcuts. He proposes schemes that are somewhere between lazy and dishonest, and presents them cheerfully. He has a flexible relationship with other people's property. There are episodes where a situation goes wrong, specifically because Jake suggested the easy route, and Finn, who trusts him completely, took it. And Jake is not troubled afterward, which is the part that stings, because Finn is. Finn carries the consequence of a decision Jake talked him into, and Jake has already moved on. That is the shadow side of not keeping a file. If nothing accumulates, then your own failures do not accumulate either, and a person who does not accumulate their own failures will repeat them, pleasantly, indefinitely. Jake never gets better. That is a fair criticism, and it should be made. He is the same at the end as at the beginning. His ease costs him growth, because growth is powered by the exact discomfort he does not experience. Finn changes enormously over 10 seasons. Jake does not change at all, and the audience tends to read that as Jake being complete and Finn being under construction, and there is another reading available, which is that Finn is capable of development and Jake is not, and that the machinery Finn is suffering under is also the machinery that makes him improvable. Nobody who is entirely comfortable ever becomes anything else. That is a real cost, and it is not small. So the ledger, honestly kept, looks something like this. Jake is happier, more restful to be around, better at friendship, immune to feuds, unbothered by failure, and permanently stuck. Finn is anxious, driven, difficult in his teens, incapable of a Sunday, and is at 29 a substantially better person than he was at 12, in ways that are visible and earned. Neither column is obviously the one to want. The show puts both on screen for a decade and lets you keep score yourself, and most viewers keep it differently, at 12, at 25, and at 40. There is a related thing about honesty, and it is uncomfortable. Jake lies, casually, frequently, without apparent friction. He makes things up. He tells stories that did not happen. He tells people what will make the moment go smoothly, rather than what is the case. And he does not experience this as lying, he experiences it as talking. Finn is compulsively honest, and it costs him constantly. He cannot manage a small social falsehood, he blurts. He confesses things nobody asked about. He is incapable of letting an inaccuracy stand, and this makes him difficult in exactly the situations where a little smoothing would help everyone. And here again, it is the same root. Finn's honesty is not a virtue he chose, it is a symptom. A person who is trying to prove they are worth keeping cannot afford to be found in a lie, because being found in one would be evidence for the prosecution. His truthfulness is defensive. Jake has nothing to defend, so the truth is just one option among several for how to get through a conversation, and he picks whichever seems likely to produce a nicer afternoon. The show does not endorse this. There are episodes where Jake's casualness with the facts causes real problems, but it is scrupulous about showing you that the honest one is not honest out of strength, and the dishonest one is not dishonest out of weakness, and that both behaviors are running off the same underlying question, present in one and absent in the other. And there is one more, which is fear. Jake is afraid of things. That surprises people who have built the sage version of him. He is startled easily. He is a coward in specific situations, particularly ones involving the supernatural or the unpleasant, and he will hide behind Finn without embarrassment. Notice the without embarrassment. That is the whole difference. Finn is afraid too, obviously, and Finn's fear comes with a second thing attached, which is shame about the fear. He pushes through, and the pushing through is heroic, and part of what he is pushing through is the intolerable thought of being someone who did not. Jake is scared, says so, hides, and then when the thing is over, he is completely fine, and it is never mentioned again. It does not go in the file. There is no file. That is possibly the single most useful demonstration in the entire show, and it is played as comedy every single time, which is why nobody registers it as a demonstration. A person who is not ashamed of being afraid recovers from fear at roughly 10 times the rate of a person who is. Jake is scared 400 times in 10 seasons and has not accumulated a single unit of anxiety by the end. There is a smaller thing worth noticing before the bigger ones, and it is about how the two of them handle waiting. Waiting is everywhere in this show, and it is almost never remarked on. Characters wait for things to be ready, for people to arrive, for a spell to finish, for the night to pass. Finn waits badly. He fidgets. He suggests alternatives. He proposes that they do something else in the meantime, and then something else after that, and the waiting becomes a series of small projects designed to disguise the fact that waiting is occurring. Jake waits perfectly. He simply stops. He can be in a corridor doing nothing for as long as the corridor requires, without visible cost, and then resume. That is a genuine skill, and almost nobody has it, and it is closely related to everything else we have discussed. If your life requires justification, then empty time is a debt accumulating. If it does not, empty time is just time. You can test yourself on this in about 4 seconds. Think about what you do at a bus stop, and there is a related one about how each of them handles being interrupted. Finn hates it. Jake does not appear to notice it happening, because interruption is only a problem if you were going somewhere, and Jake, structurally, is not. These are small observations, and I include them because the large version of this argument can start to sound abstract, and it is not abstract at all. It is made of bus stops and Sunday afternoons, and what you do when a thing you were doing gets stopped. That is where the whole difference actually lives, not in anything grand. We should spend a moment on gifts, because Jake gives them constantly, and the pattern is peculiar. Jake's gifts are bad, systematically. He gives people things they did not want, things he wanted, things that are mostly for him, things he made badly in an afternoon. And people are pleased anyway, which is the interesting part, and it is not politeness. Because a gift carries 2 pieces of information, and only one of them is the object. The other is how much attention was paid. And there is a whole class of gift, the expensive, well-chosen, appropriate one, that carries a great deal of the first and almost none of the second, and everybody can tell. Jake's gifts are terrible, and they are unmistakably from Jake. He made this. He thought of you while making it. He got it wrong. in a way that could only have been got wrong by somebody actually trying. Finn's gifts, when he gives them, tend to be correct. He works out what somebody needs and provides it. That is a service, and it is genuinely useful, and it lands differently. And if you have received both kinds, you know that the correct gift is often the more forgettable one. There is a related thing about how Jake celebrates. He is enthusiastic about other people's small achievements at a volume that seems excessive and is not. When somebody does something minor and it goes well, Jake is pleased about it out of all proportion. That is a genuine skill, and it is undervalued. Most people calibrate their enthusiasm to the significance of the event, which seems reasonable and is actually a mistake, because the significance of an event to the person who had it is not visible from outside and is usually higher than it looks. Jake overshoots by default, and overshooting is the correct error to make. Finn calibrates. He is proportionate. He is sincere and measured, and he gets the level right, and getting the level right means that a person who was quietly quite pleased about something small receives a proportionate response and feels slightly foolish for having been pleased. That is such a small mechanism, and it accounts for an enormous amount of how it feels to be around somebody. And there is one more, which is about how each of them says goodbye. Jake does not really do goodbyes. He leaves the way people leave a room they will be back in. There is no ceremony, because there is no sense of an occasion ending. Finn does goodbyes properly. He marks them. He says the thing. And you would think, given everything in this essay, that Jake's version is the healthier one, and here I am not sure it is. Because Finn's marking of endings is the same instinct that makes him remember birthdays and turn up for people he has not seen in years. He knows that things end. He is aware of it at all times, and it costs him his Sundays, and it also means that when something is the last time, he treated it like something. Jake does not know when the last time is happening. Nobody does. But Finn behaves as though any given time might be, and Jake behaves as though there will be another one. One of them is right more often. The other one is right when it counts. There is one more area where the two of them diverge, and it is the one that produces most of the show's quiet comedy, which is how they respond to something being weird. The land of Ooh is extremely weird. That is the baseline. Things happen constantly that have no explanation and that nobody requests one for. Finn wants to understand. When something inexplicable occurs, he attempts to place it. He asks what it is, where it came from, what it means, and he is often frustrated when there is no answer, and his frustration is a running joke that is not really a joke. Jake accepts everything immediately. Something impossible occurs, and Jake incorporates it into his picture of the world without friction and carries on. He is not stupid about it. He is not credulous. He just does not require the world to be accountable to him. And that is, when you look at it clearly, the correct posture for living in a place like Ooh, which is to say the correct posture for living anywhere, because the actual world is also mostly inexplicable and mostly indifferent to being explained, and the amount of energy a person spends demanding an account of it is enormous and produces nothing. Finn spends 10 seasons wanting the world to make sense. Jake spends 10 seasons in the same world, which does not make sense, having a nice time. There is a question underneath all of this that we should ask outright, because it changes the reading. What does Finn think Jake is? Not what Jake is. What Finn's model of him is, because they are different, and the gap between them is where the whole failure of transmission lives. Finn loves Jake without reservation. That is established constantly and is never complicated. But watch how Finn describes him, in the moments where he does. Jake is his brother. Jake is the funny one. Jake is the one who is always there. Jake is, in Finn's account, essentially a quality of the environment, weather that is always good. He does not describe Jake as a person with a position. He does not appear to think of Jake as having an approach to life at all. in the way you would think of a philosopher or a mentor as having one. Jake is just how Jake is. And that is exactly the problem, and it is not Finn's fault, because Jake presents no evidence of having a position. A position requires a stance, and a stance requires a thing you are standing against, and Jake is not against anything. There is an ordinary version of this in most people's lives. There is somebody, usually a parent or an older sibling or a very old friend, whose way of being you regard as simply their personality, and who is in fact enacting a whole philosophy that you could adopt, and you never see it as available because you have categorized it as a fact about them rather than an option. You only see it as an option later, usually when they are gone, and you find yourself doing it and wonder where it came from. And there is the other side of it, which is quieter. What does Jake think Finn is? Here, the show gives us less, but it gives us enough. Jake is proud of Finn, constantly. He is proud in a way that has no envy in it, which is unusual around somebody younger and more celebrated, and he is proud of things Finn does that Jake would never do himself. That is the second half of what makes him a good friend, and it is rarer than the ease. He does not need Finn to be like him. He has no project of converting Finn. He is not, in fact, trying to teach Finn anything at all, which is why the afternoons work as well as they do. If Jake were trying to teach him, the afternoons would be lessons, and Finn would feel them as lessons, and it would fail immediately and unpleasantly. Jake gets closer than any instruction ever could, precisely because he is not instructing. He just wants to have lunch, and he wants to have it with Finn, and the fact that having lunch with somebody who is at ease is the only known transmission mechanism for ease is not something Jake has ever thought about for a second. That is why it is worth calling what he has knowledge rather than wisdom. Wisdom knows what it knows. Jake has no idea. We should look at what happens to each of them in a crowd, because it is a clean test and the results are counterintuitive. Finn is popular. He is known throughout the land. He has done things for a great many people, and they are grateful and they call on him. He is, by any social measure, the more successful of the two. And in a room full of people, Finn works. He is attentive, he is responsive, he checks on people, he is aware of who needs something, he is doing the job even at a party. Jake in a crowd is having a nice time. He talks to whoever is nearest. He is not managing the room. He is not tracking anybody's state. He is enjoying himself, at a party, in the manner of somebody who came to a party. And the counterintuitive thing is who people are actually pleased to see. Because Finn's attention, however genuine, arrives with a slight edge of duty in it. You can feel it. Somebody is checking whether you are all right, and it is lovely, and it is also, faintly, an assessment. There is a person in the room whose business is the welfare of the room, and being in his care is not quite the same as being in his company. Jake's attention arrives with nothing attached. If he is talking to you, it is because he wants to be talking to you. There is no other reason available, because he does not have other reasons. That is the thing people cannot articulate about certain friends. Why is it restful to see this person? It is restful because they are not doing anything to you. Their presence in the conversation is not instrumental to any project, including a kind one. And here is where it gets uncomfortable, because kindness with a project inside it is still the most common form of kindness there is, and most of us are practicing it. If you are the person who checks on everyone, it is worth asking, quietly and without punishing yourself about it, whether the checking is entirely for them. The show does not ask Finn that. The show is far too fond of him. But it puts the two behaviors side by side in 100 rooms across 10 years, and it lets you notice which one people relax around. There is a version of this that is about the audience too, and it is short. Ask yourself which of them you would rather have a conversation with, and then ask which of them you would rather have looking for you if you were in trouble. Most people give different answers, and giving different answers is the whole finding of this essay, compressed into 2 questions. We should also put Jake next to Bonnibel for a moment, because she is the far end of the scale, and the contrast is instructive. Bonnibel runs a kingdom. She is responsible for a population she created. She is the most capable person in the show by a wide margin, and the most burdened, and every hour of her life is allocated to something. Jake has no responsibilities, and could have had many. He is, remember, one of the most powerful individuals in Oo. He could have a title. He could hold a position. Nobody in the Candy Kingdom would object if the shape-shifting dog wanted a role. He has never once expressed interest, and here is the sharp part. He has also never once expressed disdain. That is the thing that separates him from the usual literary version of this character. The standard construction is the wise fool who has renounced status and looks down on those who chase it. There is a whole tradition of that, and it is smug, and Jake is not in it. He is not above ambition. He simply does not have it, in the way you might not have an interest in golf. He does not think Bonnibel is wasting her life. He likes her. He thinks it is nice that she has a kingdom. He does not want one. That is much harder to write than contempt, and it is a genuinely unusual portrait, and it is why the character does not curdle across 10 years the way this type usually does. And Finn, standing between them, wants what Bonnibel has, structurally, without knowing that he wants it. He wants a position. He wants to be the one whose function is clear. He calls it heroism, because that is the vocabulary available to him at 12. Let us look at what Jake does with his body, because Finn does something quite different with his, and the contrast is one of the show's most physical arguments. Jake can be anything. He becomes bridges, boats, containers, walls, chairs. He is constantly turning himself into infrastructure for other people's convenience. And it costs him nothing. He does not experience becoming a chair as a diminishment. There is no dignity being negotiated. Somebody needs somewhere to sit, and he is available, and the matter does not go any further than that. That is service without martyrdom, and it is rarer than either service or martyrdom on their own, because most people who are constantly useful to others are keeping some kind of tally, even if they would deny it. There is a low hum of being owed, and you can hear it in the way they mention it, or in the way they pointedly do not mention it, which is louder. Jake has no hum. He was a bridge this morning. He does not think about it. Nobody owes him anything. Now Finn's body. Finn loses an arm. He does not get it back in any ordinary sense. What he gets instead is a series of replacements, each one strange, each one a compromise, and he adapts to each in turn. And what is striking is that Finn's body becomes a record. Everything that has happened to him is on him. The injury is visible. There is no version of Finn after a certain point that is not carrying evidence of what he went through. Jake has no marks at all. He cannot have marks. He reshapes, so nothing is written on him. Whatever happens to him is gone from his body the moment it is over. That is the same distinction again, made in flesh. One of them accumulates and one does not. One is a record and one is a surface. And the show does not say either is better. Finn's marks are a burden, and they are also, unmistakably, the reason people trust him. A person who visibly carries what happened to them is legible in a way a smooth person is not. You know where you stand with somebody who has scars. Jake is enormously likable and slightly unreachable, and that is not a coincidence. There is one more comparison, and it is about how each of them relates to the Ice King, because it is a good test case. Finn's relationship with the Ice King is adversarial for years, and then complicated, and then, eventually, protective. It travels a long distance. Finn is angry at him, then confused by him, then sorry for him, then responsible for him. It is a whole arc, and it costs Finn something at every stage. Jake's relationship with the Ice King barely moves. Jake finds him annoying, and mostly tolerable, and occasionally quite good company, from the first season to the last, with very little revision. And here is the thing. Jake's version is not shallower. It is, in a strange way, kinder from the outset. Because Finn has to travel that distance, precisely because he started by judging. He classified the Ice King as a villain, and then the classification turned out to be wrong, and the arc is the cost of undoing it. Jake never classified him. He did not think the Ice King was evil, and he did not think he was tragic. He thought he was a weird old guy who turns up. That assessment was correct on day one, and required no revision. And Jake arrived at it, not through insight, but by not bothering to make a judgment in the first place. Not judging is not the same as being tolerant. Tolerance is effortful. Jake is doing something lazier, and it produces a better result, and the show shows you this without ever suggesting you should try it. We should also notice who Jake is around people with power, because it is consistent and it is unusual. He is exactly the same. With Bonnibel, who rules a kingdom, with Marceline, who is 1,000 years old, with cosmic entities at the center of reality, with a candy citizen sweeping a street. Jake's manner does not adjust. That is genuinely hard to do, and most people cannot manage it. Almost everybody modulates around status, upward or downward, and the modulation is usually unconscious. Jake does not modulate because status is a system for allocating worth, and worth is a question, and he does not have it. There is nothing for status to attach to in him. Finn modulates. He is deferential to Bonnibel in a way that is partly the crush and partly something else. He is impressed by people. He wants to be well regarded by the ones he admires. That is the ordinary human condition, and there is nothing wrong with it, and it is also, when you see it next to somebody who does not have it, visibly a weight being carried. There is a thing about money and work in this show that belongs here, because it is where the difference becomes concrete. Nobody in the main cast has a job. That is worth stating, because it is unusual and it is a choice. Finn and Jake do not work. There is no income. They live in a tree they did not buy, eating food that arrives from somewhere, in an economy the show declines to explain. And for most of the run this is simply the premise, and you do not think about it. Then Jake's son buys the treehouse, and suddenly there is rent, and Finn and Jake have to get jobs, and the episode is about that. And what happens is instructive. Finn is fine with it. He takes to work immediately, because work is a structure with tasks in it, and he is a person who runs on tasks. He is quite good at it. He finds it satisfying in a low-grade way. Jake is miserable, not dramatically. He is just diminished by it, visibly, and the show draws him slightly smaller and slower for the whole sequence. That reads at first as Jake being work-shy, and it is more specific than that. What is being taken from him is not effort. Jake works hard at plenty of things. What is being taken is the unstructured day. The thing he actually requires, the substrate of his entire way of being, is a large quantity of time that has not been allocated. And this is where it stops being about cartoons. Because most adults do not have that, and did not choose not to have it. And the loss of it is the single largest change between being 9 and being 35. Not responsibility exactly. The disappearance of unallocated hours. Jake's posture requires a resource that most of the audience does not possess. That has to be said plainly, or the whole argument becomes a lecture delivered from a treehouse to people with commutes. You cannot simply choose to be at ease if your hours are spoken for. The show does not know this, because the show is about characters who never have to think about it. But there is something usable in it anyway, and it is this. The unallocated time you do have is more valuable than you are treating it as. Almost everybody with a small amount of it spends it on things that are also allocated, in the sense of being aimed at an outcome, improving something, preparing, catching up. Genuinely unallocated time, the kind Jake runs on, is the rarest resource an adult has, and most people convert theirs into more of the other kind at the first opportunity, because unconverted, it produces that Sunday unease. That is the practical residue of the whole essay, if there is one. Not be like Jake, just some of your free hours are being quietly annexed, and you are the one doing it, and you could stop with one or two of them. We should stop on food, because Jake cooks, and it is not a character quirk. Jake makes food constantly. It is possibly his most consistent behavior across 10 seasons. More consistent than the stretching. He makes elaborate things. He makes bad things. He makes one specific breakfast item that has become the single most recognizable thing about him in the entire culture around the show, on the basis of a song lasting about 20 seconds. And what cooking is, structurally, is the whole of Jake's philosophy, performed as a physical act. It takes time, and the time is the point. It cannot be rushed, and does not benefit from urgency. It produces something that is consumed immediately, and leaves nothing behind. It is a total waste of an afternoon, by any accounting that measures accomplishment, and it is one of the more reliable ways human beings have found to be all right. And it is done for somebody. Jake does not cook alone often. He cooks, and then there is a person eating it. And the eating is the transaction. And nothing has been fixed, and nobody has been improved, and the day has gone well. Finn eats what Jake makes, and does not cook. That is not a criticism. He is a child for most of the series. But notice that he never picks it up. 10 years of somebody producing food in front of him, and he does not become a person who produces food. Because cooking, to somebody running Finn's program, is time not spent on the thing that matters, and there is no argument that will make it look otherwise from inside that program. The song about the breakfast is 30 seconds long, and it is about a man being pleased with a small thing he has made. It has outlived almost everything else the show produced. There is a reason for that, and it is not that it is catchy. There is a third position in the house, and we should acknowledge it, because BMO is not a version of either of them. Finn justifies his life through action. Jake does not experience the question. BMO does a third thing, which is to make a world. BMO, alone in the house, invents. There are characters. There are ongoing narratives. There is a whole interior life being generated continuously out of nothing, for an audience of one, in an empty room. That is a genuinely different answer, and it is the one artists give. Not, I will earn my place. Not, my place does not require earning. But, I will make something, and the making is sufficient, and I do not require anybody to see it. The show has all three of these in one treehouse, and never comments on any of them. And it is worth noticing which of the three is the happiest, because it is not obvious, and it is not Jake. Which raises the question we have been avoiding, so let us put it directly. Is Jake happy? The assumption throughout has been yes, and the assumption deserves examination, because ease and happiness are not the same substance, and it is very easy to mistake one for the other from outside. Jake is content. That much is clear, and is different from happy. Contentment is the absence of a certain kind of friction. It is a low-variance state. Jake is reliably all right, and rarely elated, and rarely destroyed. And the band he lives inside is narrow and pleasant. Finn is not content, and is capable of joy that Jake does not display. When Finn is happy, he is incandescently happy. And it is happening because something he cared about enormously went well, and caring enormously is the price of admission to that state. You cannot have Finn's peaks without Finn's troughs, and you cannot have Jake's floor without Jake's ceiling. That is the trade, and it is not obvious which side of it a person should want to be on. The show is careful never to answer this. It does not present Jake's temperament as an achievement to aspire to, It presents it as a way some people are, with advantages, and it presents Finn's as a way other people are, with different advantages, and it declines to score them. That refusal is why the show can be watched at 9 and at 30, and mean different things without lying either time. Let us look at what each of them means by the word in the title, because they mean different things, and the show is named after one of them. When Finn says adventure, he means a quest. There is a somewhere to go, a something to be done there, a difficulty in the middle, and a state of the world afterward that differs from the state before. Adventure is a unit of accomplishment. When Jake says adventure, he means a day out. Watch him use the word. He applies it to going to get lunch. He applies it to visiting somebody. He applies it to leaving the house at all, with no destination, with the entire content of the adventure being that the two of them are outside together and something might happen. Same word, two definitions, never reconciled, in a show named after it. And the show's own title, when you have watched all of it, quietly belongs to Jake's definition rather than Finn's. Because what you remember, at the end, is not the quest's. Almost nobody's favorite episode is a quest. What you remember is the two of them somewhere, doing something minor, in good weather. The show is called Adventure Time, and it means Jake's kind. It has meant Jake's kind the whole time. It is the first thing you are told, and it takes 10 years and a rewatch in your late 20s to hear it. There is something else about rest that is worth a moment. Jake sleeps, constantly. He naps at inappropriate times, he sleeps in, he goes to bed early, and none of it is presented as a failing. He is a character who rests without guilt, in a medium that almost never allows it. Finn does not sleep well. This is not stated, but it is visible. He is up, he is out. There are episodes that begin with Finn already awake, and impatient waiting for Jake to get up, and the show plays it as comedy, and it is comedy, and it is also two people with completely different relationships to being unconscious. Rest without guilt is one of the harder adult accomplishments, and it is close to impossible for anyone running a justification program, because rest is precisely the state in which no justifying is occurring. That is why people who cannot rest describe it as wasted time. It is not that they do not want it, it is that the machinery flags it as a failure to be underway. You may be listening to this because that machinery is running right now and will not let you go to sleep. If so, then note what the show is doing, which is that it has put a 2-hour argument in front of you, at low volume, with nothing to accomplish in it, and the whole of it is about a dog who would have been asleep an hour ago. We should go back to Lady Rainicorn and the language, because it deserves more than a mention. For the entire run of the show, Jake's partner speaks a language most of the audience does not understand, and it is not subtitled. That is an extraordinary production decision, and it held for 10 years. You are locked out. You can hear the tone and read the body language, and you can catch Jake's responses, and the content is simply unavailable to you unless you happen to speak it. There is a joke construction here that the show occasionally uses, where you can tell from Jake's reaction that something significant has been said, and you were not told what. And the effect of 10 years of this is that their relationship becomes the only major relationship in the series that you cannot analyze. You have no transcript. You have no evidence to build a reading on. All you have is two figures who appear to be doing fine over a very long period in a private language. That is either a gag that got out of hand or one of the smarter things in the show, and I think it is the second, because of what it does to your model of Jake. Every other character in Adventure Time is knowable. You get their interiority, their history, their wounds. Jake has a locked room in the middle of his life, and you are never given the key, and it means that no matter how confidently anyone argues about who Jake is, there is a decade of unheard conversation that would probably complicate it. And that is true of every actual person you know. You have a model of your friends that is built entirely from the portion of their life you have observed, and the portion you have observed is small, and the untranslated parts are where most of it happens. The show does that to you deliberately, with its most apparently transparent character. The one who seems to have nothing hidden has more hidden than anyone, and it is hidden in plain sight, in another language, in the room, every week. There is something worth saying about Jake and BMO too, because it corrects the fatherhood ledger slightly. Jake is not a good father to his children. We established that, and it stands. He is very good to BMO. Watch it. He is patient with BMO's games. He plays along. He takes BMO seriously as a person, which not everyone in the household consistently does. He is protective in an unshowy way, and he is affectionate without being condescending about it. So the capacity is there. It is not that Jake is incapable of parental attention. What seems to be true instead is that Jake is good with whoever is in the house. His care is proximity-based. It is not a commitment he holds and carries to wherever the object of it is. It operates at close range, continuously, on whoever is present, and it is excellent, and it does not travel. His children were not in the house. They grew up somewhere else, quickly, and by the time there was anything to attend to, they were adults living elsewhere, and Jake's entire model of care does not have a mechanism for people who are not in the room. That is a real limitation, and it is also the most common one there is. An enormous number of people are wonderful to whoever is in front of them, and quietly hopeless at maintaining anything at a distance. It is not a moral failing exactly. It is a shape. Finn, notably, is the opposite. Finn maintains obligations to people he has not seen in years. He carries them. He turns up. There it is again, in another costume. The file has a cost, and the file has a use, and the person with no file is warm in the room and forgets you outside it, and the person with the file is difficult and remembers your birthday. Let us talk about what Jake never asks, because it is a large silence, and it runs the whole length of the show. Jake never asks what happened to the world. He lives in the ruins of a civilization. He eats out of its refrigerators and sits on its furniture and walks past its cars, and he has never once, in 10 seasons, wondered aloud what any of it was. Finn does, repeatedly. Finn wants to know about the humans, about before, about how it all went. His curiosity about the past is continuous and painful, and he goes to considerable trouble over it. And you could read Jake's silence as incuriosity, which is partly right, and there is a better reading. The past is only urgent if you need an account of yourself. Finn needs one, because of the question, where did I come from, is the first move in where do I belong, is the first move in am I allowed to be here. Jake is allowed to be here. So the past is just some old stuff that happened before he was born, which is, when you say it plainly, an entirely accurate description of the past. There is a kind of freedom in that which is difficult to look at directly, because most of us are quite attached to our histories, and we should be. And there is also a version of that attachment which is entirely a search for permission. Jake did not need permission. So he never went looking, and he did not miss anything, and the world's dead civilization sat in his living room for a decade as furniture, which is what it was. There is one more piece of evidence, and it is sitting in the title of the last episode, and almost nobody clocks it. The finale is called "Come Along With Me." That is not a heroic phrase. It is not a call to arms or a statement of purpose. It is an invitation to go somewhere together with no destination specified, which is, word for word, the thing Jake has been saying for 10 years. It is also the first line of the song at the beginning of every episode. It has been the first thing you heard, hundreds of times, since you were a child. Come along with me. Not save the world. Not become who you are meant to be. Just come with me, we are going out. It will probably be fine. The The show opens on that line and closes on that line and spends the middle following a boy who is trying to accomplish something, and the frame around him, at both ends, belongs to the other one. That is either an accident of songwriting, or it is the whole thesis of the series stated twice at maximum volume, where nobody would look for it, and after 10 seasons, I do not think it is an accident. We should look at the 2 or 3 times the show puts Jake on his own, because they are rare and they are informative. When Finn is not there, Jake does not fall apart and he does not become a different person. He mostly does slightly smaller versions of the same things. He eats, he putters, he talks to himself in a way that is companionable rather than lonely. That is the test of whether somebody's ease is real or is being supplied by company, and Jake passes it. His temperature does not depend on Finn being in the room. Compare Finn alone, which the show also gives you. Finn alone is worse. He escalates. Without somebody to regulate him, he goes further into whatever he is going into. And the episodes where he is by himself for a stretch tend to be the ones where he does something he regrets. That is not a criticism of Finn either. Most people are like that. Most people's stability is at least partly a function of who is around, and the fact that this is invisible until the person is not around is one of the harder things about losing anybody. And it explains something about the 29-year-old Finn that would otherwise be puzzling. He is steadier at 29, alone, than he was at 17, with Jake beside him, which means he did not just borrow the regulation. Some of it got installed. You can borrow somebody's steadiness for years, and then discover, after they are gone, that a portion of it stayed, not the whole of it. Enough to notice. That is the most hopeful thing in this entire essay, and it is worth holding on to, because it is the answer to the obvious objection, which is that, if the lesson cannot be taught, then the decade was wasted. It was not wasted. Nothing transmitted as a lesson. Something transmitted anyway, at a much slower rate, by simple proximity, the way a cold room gets warm. Before that, we should deal with what the culture has done to Jake, because it is instructive, and it is a warning about how this sort of thing goes wrong. Jake has become, over 15 years, a source of quotations. There are compilations. There are images with the line about being bad at something laid over a picture of him. He has been absorbed into a whole genre of gentle motivational content, and the version of Jake that circulates most widely is a smiling sage who dispenses comfort. That version is not him, and the difference matters. The circulated Jake is offering encouragement. He is telling you that you will get there, that your struggle is worthwhile, that you should keep going. That is motivational material, and it is aimed squarely at people running the justification program. It says, your project is good, here is fuel. The actual Jake is not encouraging anybody. He has never once told Finn that he will get there. He does not comment on Finn's project at all, in either direction. He simply lives adjacent to it, in a way that implies, without arguing, that the project was optional. Those are opposite messages, and one of them has been converted into the other, because what survives extraction is the part that can be stated, and the part that can be stated is always the encouragement. You cannot quote an absence. So the most widely circulated understanding of the character is close to the inversion of the character, and it will stay that way, and there is nothing to be done about it, and it is a reasonable illustration of why Finn did not learn it either. The same problem, at a different scale. The thing is not sayable. Anything sayable that comes out of it is a different thing. There is a small structural detail that supports all of this, and it is worth a moment. Consider whose house it is. It is Finn and Jake's treehouse, and the show treats it as shared, and if you look at the history, Jake was there first. Jake is older. Jake had a life before Finn was old enough to be in it. Finn moved into an arrangement that already existed, and Jake never once mentions this. In 10 years, in every dispute about the house, about chores, about who does what, Jake never plays the card. He does not say, "I was here first." He does not say, "This is mine." There is no moment anywhere in the series where seniority is invoked. That is a very small restraint, exercised continuously for a decade, and it is the sort of thing that only becomes visible once you have lived with somebody. Because most people cannot resist it. The claim gets made eventually, in some argument, in some tired week. I was here first. I do more. The tally comes out. Jake has no tally to bring out. That is the practical consequence of not keeping a file, and it is worth about 10,000 small good afternoons across a decade. And there is one more thing about the two of them, and it is the thing that makes the whole show work. They are never bored of each other. 10 years, the same house, the same person, the same walk to the same places. Two characters together in nearly every scene of nearly 300 episodes. And there is not a single moment, anywhere in the series, where either of them appears tired of the other one. That is not realistic. That is a choice. Real people in close quarters for a decade get tired of each other periodically. And good writing usually includes that, and this show has plenty of conflict between them, and never that particular conflict. I think it is deliberate, and I think it is the show's one piece of open wish fulfillment. Everything else in Adventure Time is unsparing. The world ended. Parents fail. Minds go. Nothing gets fixed. The show is honest to the point of discomfort about how things actually go. And in the middle of all that, there is exactly one thing given, without qualification, which is that these two like each other, completely, and it does not wear out. That is what the show chose to hand you, out of everything it could have offered. Not a happy ending, not a repaired world, just the demonstration that two people can be in each other's company for a decade, and it can stay good the whole way through. Everything else is a description. That one is a gift. Let us turn the whole thing around now and point it at you, because it has been about two cartoon characters for an hour and a half, and it was never really about them. There is a reasonable chance you have been sorting yourself while listening. Most people do. And there is a reasonable chance you have decided you are Finn, because almost everybody decides they are Finn. That is worth examining, because it is not usually true, and the reason it feels true is instructive. Finn is the one with the inner monologue you can hear. The show gives you his interiority constantly, his doubts, his wanting, his self-assessment. You have spent 10 seasons inside his head. Of course you identify with him. You have been given no access to Jake's head at all. So the identification may be an artifact of narration rather than a fact about you. Ask a different question instead. Not who do you feel like. Ask what happens on a Sunday when there is nothing you have to do. If the answer is that you enjoy it, and you do something small, and the day passes agreeably, and you do not audit it afterward, then whatever you feel like, you have a substantial amount of Jake in you, and you should probably stop worrying about it. If the answer is that you feel a low unease that builds through the afternoon, and you end up doing something productive at about 4 o'clock in order to make the day count, and you go to bed with a faint sense of having got away with something, or not quite got away with it, then you have the machinery, and you have had it a long time, and you did not install it yourself. Most people who are listening to a 2-hour essay at 1 in the morning are in the second group. That is not a judgment. It is close to a description of the audience. And the useful thing is not to try to become the first group, because that is the plan trap again. That is making ease into a project, which is the one operation guaranteed to prevent it. The useful thing is much smaller. It is to notice that the machinery is machinery, that the unease on a Sunday afternoon is not information about whether the day was well spent. It is just a program that was installed early, running as designed, producing its output regardless of the input. Jake's advantage was never that he had better answers. It was that the question was never asked in his hearing. You cannot unask it. But you can, occasionally, in a good week, notice that it is being asked by a mechanism rather than by reality, and that noticing does about 10% of the work. There is a version of this that points the other way, and it deserves a moment, because you may be somebody's Jake. If you are the older one, if you are the calm one in a friendship, if there is somebody younger than you who is currently going through the loud part, and you have been quietly being all right next to them for a while, you will not find out what that did. That is the arrangement. There is no report. They will not tell you at the time, because they do not know, and by the time they know, you may not be in a position to hear it. And you will occasionally suspect you are being useless. That is the specific hazard of the role, because from inside, being steady looks like doing nothing, and doing nothing feels like failing somebody who is visibly struggling, and the temptation is to switch tactics and start being helpful in a legible way. Do not. The legible version does not work. Jake never once sat Finn down. If he had, it would have been a scene, and scenes do not install anything. What installs is lunch, repeatedly, over years, with no agenda, at a constant temperature. That is a very unglamorous prescription, and it is the only one this show offers. There is a question people ask about this show that is usually treated as a joke and is worth taking seriously for a minute. Who is the main character? The obvious answer is Finn. The camera follows him. The interiority is his. The arc is his. But run a different test. Ask which character, if removed, would cause the show to stop existing. Take Finn out, and you have a show about a dog who lives in a tree with a small robot, having good afternoons in a ruined world. That is not nothing. It is a slower, stranger show, and it could exist. Take Jake out, and Finn is a boy alone in a wrecked landscape, with a sword and a wound, and no regulation. That is not a children's show. That is not a show anybody would broadcast. It is unbearable within about 4 episodes. Jake is load-bearing in a way Finn is not. He is what makes the premise survivable. Every episode of Adventure Time is an episode about a traumatized orphan in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and the reason you never noticed is that there is a relaxed dog in the frame the entire time telling you it is all right. That is a structural function, and it is the same function he performs for Finn inside the story. He lowers the temperature of the room he is in, and the room he is in includes you, which means that for 10 years, the thing that made this show watchable for children was a character demonstrating, continuously, that a person can be at ease in a broken world. Not saying it, not teaching it, being it in the corner of the frame while somebody else has the plot. And that is the answer to who the main character is. Finn is the subject. Jake is the argument. We should look at the fights, because the show is full of them, and the two of them fight completely differently, and it is the same argument again, in another costume. Finn fights to win. Obviously, that is what a fight is. Jake fights to end the fight. Those sound like the same thing, and they are not. Watch Jake in a combat situation and count how often he actually attacks. He is much more likely to contain, to block, to absorb, to physically remove the two parties from each other, to become a wall between things. His enormous power is used almost entirely defensively across 10 seasons, and nobody remarks on it. He is not a pacifist. He will hit something if hitting it is required, but his instinct in a conflict is to reduce it rather than to resolve it in his favor, and that is a different instinct, and most people do not have it. And it makes him worse at fighting, in the narrow sense, and better at conflict, in the wide sense. There are episodes where a situation is diffused entirely, because Jake got in the middle of it, and made it inconvenient to continue. Finn cannot do that, because from inside Finn's theory, a fight that is diffused rather than won is a fight that has not been dealt with. It will come back. Better to settle it now. Both positions have merit, and the show does not adjudicate, but it is worth noticing which of them ends up with more people who are still willing to talk to him. And there is the question of enemies, which is related. Finn accumulates them. He has a rogues gallery. There are individuals in Oo who dislike him and have reasons, and he can list them, and some of those grudges run for years. Jake has essentially no enemies. In a decade of adventuring in a hostile world, he does not appear to have made anyone permanently angry with him. That is not because he is nicer. He is not particularly nicer. It is because you cannot maintain a grudge against somebody who is not keeping score. A feud requires two participants who are both tracking it, and Jake does not track anything, and grudges directed at him simply fail to find purchase and eventually fall off. That is a genuinely useful property, and it is not a strategy, it is a side effect. The same absence that produces the naps produces the immunity to feuds. Finn keeps score because Finn keeps a file, and everything goes in the file, including what other people have done to him. There is one last piece, and it is the smallest and possibly the most telling, and it is about the treehouse. They live together. For the whole show, two people sharing a home for a decade, and the show is remarkably specific about the domestic details, and one thing you can observe is who does what. Jake does the household maintenance that gets done. He cooks. He tidies, sporadically. He is the one who makes the place a place, rather than a base of operations. Finn treats the treehouse as somewhere he returns to. That is a whole model of home in two behaviors. For one of them, the house is where life happens, and the adventures are excursions from it. For the other, the adventures are where life happens, and the house is where you sleep between them. And this is worth noticing, because it explains something about the ending that is otherwise strange. When Finn is 29 and there is no Jake, he has a home. He lives in it properly. He is not using it as a base. Somewhere in the intervening years, he changed his mind about what a house is for, and nobody taught him, and there is only one place he could have got it. There is a whole area we have not touched, and it is the one most people would have started with, which is that Jake is a dog. Not a person who happens to be drawn as a dog. A dog with dog instincts, dog priorities, and a dog's relationship to a day. This is easy to dismiss as design. The show is full of talking animals, and none of the others are especially dog-like. But Jake is, consistently, in ways that are played as jokes and are structurally doing work. He is food-motivated to an almost total degree. He sleeps at any opportunity and in any position. He is startled by sudden noises. He is enormously loyal without appearing to have decided to be. He greets people with delight. He is entirely present to whatever is currently occurring and has no visible relationship to next week. Now, here is the thing that makes this more than a joke. That list is also, more or less exactly, the list of qualities we have been describing for 2 hours as a philosophical position. Everything Jake knows is what a dog is. Living in the present. Not keeping score. Not requiring a justification for existing. Enthusiasm out of proportion. No sense of an ending. Loyalty as a fact rather than a decision. The show did not construct a philosophy and then assign it to a dog. It took a dog, accurately, and let the philosophy fall out. And that is either deflating or it is the most interesting thing in the entire series, depending on how you hold it. The deflating version says, of course Jake is at ease, he is an animal, animals do not have existential problems, this is not a model for anybody. The other version is more troubling and I think more true. Dogs are content because they do not have the equipment for the question. Humans have the equipment, but the equipment is not ancient. The particular anxiety we have been describing all night, the sense that one's existence requires justification through achievement, is not a permanent feature of being a person. It is culturally specific, and historically recent, and it is far stronger in some places than others. Which means the question Finn is running is not the human condition. It is a program, installed, at a particular time, by particular circumstances, on hardware that did not originally come with it. And the dog in the room is not a lesser being who is missing something. He is what the hardware runs like, without that particular program. That is a much larger claim than a cartoon should be making, and I am not certain the show is making it. But it is sitting there, in the premise, in the fact that the wise one is a dog, and the anxious one is a human, and the show ran that arrangement for 10 years, without ever pointing at it. There is a small, brutal detail that goes with this, and we should say it, because it is part of the picture. Dogs do not live as long as people. Jake is older than Finn. He was an adult when Finn was a child. And they are on the same road at different speeds, and the arithmetic is available to anybody who wants to do it. And nobody does it while watching, because you do not do arithmetic about your friends. The show is quiet about this for 10 seasons. It does not foreshadow. It does not have Jake reflecting on mortality. It simply builds a friendship between a boy and a dog, and lets the audience carry a fact they already know, and are choosing not to look at. And then, years later, it shows you Finn at 29, and the fact is just there, unremarked, in the shape of the room. That is one of the crueler pieces of construction in modern television, and it was done entirely by omission. There is a caveat that has to go in here, because an argument that runs 2 hours without doubting itself is not an argument, it is a sales pitch. Some of what has been said tonight is more than the show can carry. Adventure Time was made quickly, by a rotating crew, over 8 years, to a broadcast schedule. Different writers wanted different things from Jake. He is not a single coherent construction executed to a plan. Some of his consistency is the consistency of a comedy character being written the way comedy characters get written, which is, keep doing the thing that works. The line about being bad at something was almost certainly not conceived as a load-bearing philosophical statement. It was a good joke that landed. And there is a whole industry of finding depth in this show, and some of that depth was put there, and some of it has been added, by 15 years of very devoted people wanting it to be there. So hold the reading loosely. It is a reading, it is not a decoding. But here is why I think most of it survives the doubt. The pattern is too long. A writer's room can produce an accidental resonance in an episode. It is much harder to accidentally produce 10 years in which one character consistently initiates the plotless episodes and the other one consistently cannot sit still. That is not a moment. That is a structure. And structures that hold for 280 episodes are usually load-bearing, whether or not anyone articulated them in a meeting. The show may not have known what it was doing. It did it anyway. That happens more often than people admit, in art and in most other things. There is a last piece of the picture, and it belongs here rather than earlier, because it only makes sense once you have the rest. Jake wants very little, but he is not without wants, and the 2 or 3 things he does want tell you what he is. He wants Finn to be all right, not to be successful, not to be a hero. All right, he is visibly bothered when Finn is not, and it is the only thing that reliably disturbs his temperature. He wants a good afternoon. And there is a third one that surfaces rarely, and it is the interesting one. He wants, occasionally and unmistakably, to be regarded. He likes it when he is good at something, and somebody notices. He is not immune to it. There are moments across the series where Jake is briefly and slightly vain, and they are played for laughs, and they are the most human thing about him. That matters, because a character with no wants at all is not restful, he is empty. The reason Jake's ease is convincing rather than saintly is that he is a bit lazy and a bit vain, and occasionally a bit of a coward, and the ease sits on top of ordinary flaws rather than replacing them. Ease is not purity. That is worth knowing if you are the kind of person who has been treating your own peace as something you have to deserve by first becoming good enough for it. Jake did not deserve it. He just has it, and he is not a better person than Finn, and it is not a reward. Before we go forward, there is a question about the show's shape that has been sitting underneath this for a while, and it deserves to be asked directly. Why is there no episode where Finn learns it? 10 seasons is a very long time. There was ample opportunity. Any competent writer's room could have built the episode. Finn is exhausted. Jake says the thing. Finn understands. The music comes up. The lesson lands. That episode does not exist, and it is not because nobody thought of it. It is a conspicuous absence in a show that otherwise gives Finn a great many lessons, explicitly, in episodes designed for the purpose. So it was declined. Somebody decided not to make it, or it was made and did not work, or the shape of the show kept refusing it. And the reason it would not work is the reason we have already established. The lesson episode would have to end with Finn understanding, and understanding is precisely what cannot happen, because if Finn could receive it, he would not be Finn. But there is a second reason, and it is about honesty. Television is full of characters learning things. It is the primary unit of the medium. Somebody has a flaw at the top of the episode and does not have it at the bottom, and this is so common that we have stopped noticing that it does not describe anything that occurs. People do not learn things that way. People learn things over decades, unevenly, mostly without noticing, and the moment of insight, when it comes, is almost never the cause of the change. It is a report issued long after the change happened. Adventure Time knows this. You can see it in how change actually works in the show, which is slowly, off-screen, cumulatively, and visible only when you compare episodes years apart. Finn at 17 is enormously different from Finn at 12, and there is no episode where he became different. It happened in the gaps. That is a hard thing for a serialized show to commit to, because the gaps are where nothing is broadcast, and a show that puts its character development in the gaps is essentially trusting the audience to do arithmetic across a decade. They trusted you to do it. Most of you did it without knowing you were doing it, which is also how the arithmetic works in your own life. And there is a final structural thing worth naming, which is what the show does with time between seasons. Time passes in Adventure Time in a way that is not tracked. Characters age unevenly. Some things clearly took years and are never dated. There is no calendar. That is normally a weakness in a long-running show. Here, it produces something specific, which is that you cannot audit anybody's progress. You cannot say, Finn spent 2 years being difficult and 18 months recovering. You only get before and after, at intervals, with the middle removed. And that is the actual experience of watching somebody change. You do not see the process. You see them at Christmas, and again the next Christmas, and something is different, and neither of you could say when it happened. The show is built to reproduce that, and the price of building it that way is that it can never have the episode where Finn learns it. It gave up the satisfying scene in order to be accurate. That is a rare trade, and almost nobody makes it. Now we go forward, and this is the part that is difficult. The show ends, and then, some years later, more of it arrives, and in the new material, Finn is 29. He has a life. It is a decent life. He is not in crisis. He has a partner and a home and things he does, and he is functional and largely content in the way a person of 29 is content, which is to say mostly with a low background hum, and Jake is not there. The show does not make an event of it. There is no episode about the loss. It is simply the condition of the world now, established the way you establish weather, and everything Finn does happens inside it. That is a remarkable thing for a franchise to do to its audience, and it is done with almost no ceremony. The unit that was in the title sequence for a decade is one person now, and the show declines to dramatize it, and the declining is what makes it land. Because that is how it actually goes. There is not a scene. There is a period afterward in which the person is simply not there, and the not being there is not an event. It is a permanent alteration in the temperature of every room, and it does not get a soundtrack. So look at Finn at 29. He is doing well. He is kinder than he was. He is capable of sitting with people, which he could not do at 15. When Simon needs somebody steady, Finn is the one who is steady, and he does it without flailing and without trying to fix it. And if you have been paying attention across this whole essay, you will notice that he is doing, at 29, exactly what Jake did for him. He got there. Not by being taught, by running the program long enough that pieces of it wore down, and by having been in the presence of it for so long that when he arrived at the place, he recognized the furniture. And he still, underneath, is asking the question. That is the honest part, and the new material does not pretend otherwise. There is a restlessness in him, a low-grade sense that this might not be what it was for, that the years of being the hero were leading somewhere, and this is not obviously it. He is fine, and he is not settled, which is precisely the condition of a great many people at 29 and 35 and 42. You do the thing that was supposed to be the point. You get through the part that was difficult. And then there is a Tuesday, and there is nothing structurally wrong with the Tuesday, and the question that has been running underneath since childhood is still running, and it is quieter now, but it is not gone. Jake would have known what to say. That is the thought that arrives, and it is not really true. Jake would not have known what to say. Jake would have said something stupid about a sandwich, and it would have helped, and neither of them would have known why. But the sandwich is not available anymore. That is what it means for somebody to be gone. Not that you have lost their advice, because their advice was mostly nonsense. You have lost the thing that came with the nonsense. And here is the last turn, and it is the one worth staying awake for. Finn will get there. Probably. Most people do, eventually, in their 40s or their 50s, by the exhaustion route, in some ordinary week. He will be sitting somewhere, doing nothing in particular, and it will occur to him that the afternoon is fine, and that nothing is required of him, and the machinery that has been running since the woods will just quietly stop, and he will notice how quiet it is. And the first thought he has, in that moment, will be that Jake was doing this the entire time. He will realize it about 30 years too late to say so. He will be sitting in a chair somewhere understanding, finally, what he had been looking at for a decade, and the person who could have received that understanding will have been gone for most of his adult life. That is the shape of it. That is what happens with almost everybody who taught you something without meaning to. The comprehension arrives long after the person, and there is no mechanism for delivery, and you are left holding a piece of gratitude with no address on it. It is not tragic exactly. It is just the standard arrangement, and almost nobody mentions it. There is one last thing to sit with before we finish, and it is about what you do with an argument like this once it is over. Because there is a risk in a 2-hour essay that has been building a case, which is that it hands you a verdict, and the verdict here appears to be that one way of living is lighter than another, and you have the heavier one. That is not a useful thing to be given at 1 in the morning, and it is not what the show says. What the show does, if you watch the whole of it, is refuse to sort them. Finn is not a cautionary tale. He is the protagonist. He is loved by everyone in the story and by everyone watching, and the show follows him rather than Jake for a decade because his difficulty is the interesting thing, and Jake's ease, honestly, would not sustain an episode on its own. That is worth saying plainly. Nobody makes a show about Jake. There is no story in a person who is fine. Story requires somebody who wants something, and wanting is the machinery, and the machinery is what you have. So the machinery is not a defect. It is the reason you have a life with events in it. It is why you have done anything at all. Every good thing you have made was made by the part of you that could not leave it alone. And if that part were switched off tomorrow, you would be more comfortable and considerably less interesting, including to yourself. The offer here is not to become Jake. It was never available, and it would not be a good trade. The offer is smaller. It is to know that the machinery is machinery. To recognize, on a Sunday afternoon when the unease starts, that what you are hearing is not a report on how your life is going. It is a program running, installed early, doing exactly what it was built to do, on a day that is objectively fine. You cannot uninstall it. You can occasionally notice it is a program and let the afternoon continue anyway. That is a small thing, and it is roughly what a decade next to Jake would get you, and it is available at a considerable discount because you are just listening to somebody describe it. And there is one last piece, and it is the one to take with you. Somebody is your Jake right now. Somebody has been quietly all right in your vicinity for years, without appearing to do anything, and a portion of whatever steadiness you have came from proximity to them, and you have never attributed it, and you are not going to. You could tell them, that is available. It is one message, and it would be strange to send, and they would not know what to do with it. Most people do not send it. That is fine too. The show does not send it either. Finn never says any of this to Jake, not once in 10 seasons, because you do not have the words while the person is still in the room making lunch. But it is late, and you are awake, and this is the hour in which people occasionally do things they would not do at 11 in the morning. So what did Jake know? Not a lesson. There is no sentence at the bottom of this that you could write on something and put on a wall. Every attempt to state it turns it into advice, and as advice, it is worthless, and that is not a failure of the statement, it is a property of the thing. The closest you can get is this. He knew that he was allowed to be here, not because he had earned it, not provisionally, pending results. He simply had the assumption, underneath everything, at a level below thought, that his presence in the world was not a question anybody was asking, including himself. And out of that one absence came all of it, the ease, the patience, the willingness to be wrong, the declining of problems, the good afternoons, the ability to sit in a room with somebody in pain and not need to fix them, the naps, the cooking. None of those are techniques. They are all just what a person does when the question is not running. Finn had the question. He has it still, at 29, quieter. He built an extraordinary life out of having it, and helped more people than Jake ever did, and became someone who stays. And he did all of that on top of a wound that never closed, using the wound as the engine. Both of those are ways to get through a life. Neither is available to the other one. And the show, which was made for children and ran on a channel between advertisements for toys, put both of them in the same treehouse for 10 years and let you watch, and never once told you which one to be. It is very late now. Somewhere in it is the middle of an afternoon that nothing depends on. There is a hill, there is a boy on it who will not sit still for very much longer, and a dog beside him who is already lying down, and there is food, and the light is good, and neither of them is thinking about any of this. Nothing is being accomplished, nothing is required. It is simply an afternoon, and there will be several thousand more of them, and this one will not be remembered by either of them as significant, and it is the whole point of everything. That is what he knew. You are allowed to be here. You do not have to finish anything tonight. The afternoon is fine. Come along. Sleep well,